The young and the restless spoilers Jack and Diane had long since learned to savor the rare moments of peace in a world that rarely granted them respite. Together, they had built a life founded on love, trust, and the belief that, at least for a little while, joy could triumph over the chaos that defined Genoa City. Their world had grown even brighter when they entrusted Kyle with the most crucial role at Jabot, a symbol of hope for the future, a legacy they hoped would mend old wounds and steer their family toward a more peaceful horizon. Yet, beneath the surface of their tentative happiness, dark currents were stirring. Jack had caught wind of a disturbing signal. Whispers and clandestine messages suggested that Victor was preparing to rekindle a long-dormant battle. Jack had believed that the bitter enmity between Victor and his foes, exemplified by the recent defeats of Ian Ward and Jordan, would have softened with time. After all, the grudges that had once fueled violent confrontations seemed to have dimmed, replaced by an uneasy truce where no one had truly suffered. However, the rumors now pointed to something different. Victor, ever the relentless warrior in the theater of corporate warfare, was setting his sights on a target no one dared imagine: Kyle. The mere thought that Victor and his ally Michael were scheming against Kyle sent shockwaves of anger through Jack's heart. His son, still young and raw, was being drawn into a war that had long exacted its toll on their family. To Jack, the idea that the battle-hardened Victor would dare lay a finger on his precious Kyle was unthinkable. It was not just an affront, it was a declaration of war against the very foundation of his family's future. Unable to contain his fury and desperation, Jack stormed out of the relative safety of his home, his mind a whirlwind of memories from past clashes with Victor. Each confrontation had left scars, both physical and emotional, and the thought of exposing Kyle to the same vicious cycle of violence was something Jack could not abide. He was determined to protect his family at all costs. With every step, the weight of responsibility and the intensity of his protective instincts propelled him forward as he sought out Victor. Finding Victor was never easy. In a city where power and ambition were cloaked in layers of cunning and deception, the man always seemed to be several steps ahead. But Jack's resolve was unyielding. When he finally located Victor, the confrontation was both inevitable and explosive. Jack's voice trembled with both anger and desperation as he warned, "Stay away from my family, Victor. I won't allow you to hurt Kyle, or any of us, for that matter." To Jack's dismay, Victor's response was cold and unrepentant. With his trademark arrogance, Victor dismissed the plea as if it were a mere inconvenience. "I'm not going to step back, Jack," Victor sneered. "The fight isn't over, and I have plans to ensure that Jabot remains under my control, no matter what obstacles you throw in my way." His words, as icy as they were resolute, fanned the flames of Jack's fury. In a moment that seemed to defy the decades of enmity between them, Jack's restraint evaporated. The years of tension, countless battles, and the unbearable thought of Kyle being used as a pawn in Victor's dangerous game culminated in a burst of uncontrolled emotion. Jack lunged forward, his fist connecting with Victor's jaw. The sound of the blow echoed like a gunshot through the silent corridor of power, a physical manifestation of all the years of rivalry and bitter memories. Diane, who had hoped for a peaceful evening after a day of quiet contentment, was suddenly thrust into the heart of chaos. Tears streamed down her face as she witnessed the eruption of violence. A violence that threatened to unravel the fragile tapestry of their carefully constructed life. In the background, Michael, ever the reluctant mediator caught between allegiances, leapt forward in a desperate attempt to quell the rising storm. His arms reached out, his voice a mix of urgency and plea, "Stop this, Jack. This isn't the way." But the anger and desperation had taken root too deeply. Jack's actions were not simply a reaction to Victor's words, they were a culmination of a lifetime of conflict, betrayal, and the realization that his family was once again under siege by a man who thrived on strife. The scene that unfolded was one of raw, unfiltered emotion. Jack's anger was palpable, a living force that reverberated through every clenched muscle and gritted tooth. The clash between him and Victor was not new, it was an old dance, one they had performed too many times before, yet each encounter left deeper wounds than the last. As the two men grappled, the air was filled with the sound of grunts, shouts, and the heavy thud of fists meeting flesh. Each strike was laden with the weight of past transgressions, every blow a silent reminder of promises broken and trust betrayed. For Jack, this was not just a physical altercation, it was a battle for the soul of his family, a fight to reclaim the sanctity of the life he had worked so hard to build with Diane. Diane's cries of anguish cut through the tumult, a stark contrast to the clamor of violence. Her tears were a testament to the heartbreak that had defined so much of their past, a past marked by endless cycles of reconciliation and conflict. She wept not just for Jack, whose fierce determination she both admired and feared, but for Kyle, whose future now hung precariously in the balance. In that moment, Diane's heart ached with the realization that the world they had fought so hard to carve out was on the verge of collapsing under the weight of renewed hostilities. Meanwhile, Michael's efforts to intervene were met with the raw intensity of the feud. Though his hands tried to pull the combatants apart, his voice was drowned out by the fury that both men exuded. His own conflicted loyalties, torn between the enigmatic alliances of the past and the present duty to protect the innocent, rendered him almost powerless in the face of such entrenched animosity. For Jack, the confrontation was more than a fight, it was a final, desperate bid to safeguard the promise of a peaceful future for Diane and Kyle. Every blow he delivered was imbued with the silent vow that he would not let Victor's ambition destroy the sanctuary they had built. In his eyes, the struggle was not merely about a personal vendetta, it was about preserving a legacy, a future where love and family triumphed over the bitter legacies of betrayal. Victor, for his part, was equally unyielding. His face contorted with a mixture of rage and cold determination, he refused to retreat. His every move was calculated, his responses laced with the same ruthlessness that had long made him a formidable adversary. As the two titans clashed, it became evident that neither was willing to yield an inch. Their conflict was a collision of ideologies, the desire for peace versus the relentless pursuit of power. The scuffle, brief as it was, left an indelible mark on everyone present. Diane's cries gradually subsided into sobs, and Michael's attempts at mediation fell into a resigned silence as he realized that this battle was one that could only end when both men had expended every last drop of their anger. In that charged moment, the air was thick with the unspoken acknowledgement that the cycle of violence was far from over. As the dust settled and Jack reluctantly pulled back, the gravity of the moment became painfully clear. The confrontation was not merely a solitary clash between two longtime enemies. It was the harbinger of an impending war that threatened to engulf their entire world. The lines between right and wrong had blurred, and every person in Genoa City now found themselves caught in the crossfire of a battle that had deep historical roots and far-reaching consequences. In the aftermath of the physical altercation, an uneasy calm descended over the scene. Jack, breathing heavily, his eyes still burning with the intensity of his conviction, turned to Diane. His voice, now softer yet still tinged with sorrow and determination, conveyed a promise: "I won't let them take you or Kyle from me. I need time to find a way out of this madness, to protect what matters most." His words were a vow to reclaim a semblance of peace, one that had been so brutally shattered by Victor's relentless ambition. Yet, Victor's response, his unwavering declaration that he would continue the fight, remained a dark cloud over the fragile hope that Jack and Diane clung to. It was a reminder that in a world built on shifting alliances and old grudges, peace was always a fleeting dream. And as Michael watched, helplessly standing between the two behemoths of Genoa City's power struggle, he couldn't help but wonder if there would ever be a moment when the cycle of violence would finally cease. For now, the stage was set for the next chapter in their long and tumultuous saga, a chapter that promised further confrontations, deeper betrayals, and the unyielding quest for control over a destiny that seemed as unchangeable as it was inevitable. The family that Jack and Diane had fought so hard to protect was on the brink of being torn apart once more, and only time would tell if love and loyalty could prevail over the insidious forces of ambition and revenge. In the quiet that followed, as night fell over Genoa City, the echoes of the day's conflict resonated like a somber warning. The delicate balance between power and peace had been shattered, and the battle lines were now etched deeper than ever. And amidst the lingering tension, one question loomed large: Could Jack's desperate plea for respite and protection ever silence the relentless roar of Victor's ambition? Only the unfolding days would reveal whether the family's bonds could be reforged in the crucible of conflict, or if the cycle of betrayal and retribution would ultimately claim them all. In the midst of the ever-turbulent power plays of Genoa City, everyone began to see that Victor's actions were growing more and more irrational. His latest schemes were not only outlandish but deliberately designed to force Jack into defeat. Victor's mind, always a labyrinth of ambition and cruelty, had now taken a turn toward the absurd, setting forth a series of ludicrous challenges and obstacles that he expected would leave Jack floundering. The entire community watched in disbelief as Victor, in his typical domineering fashion, issued demands that were as baseless as they were cruel. It wasn't just that Victor was playing with fire, he was practically dousing the world in gasoline, eager to watch everything burn. His convoluted plans seemed to have one ultimate goal: to crush Jack once and for all. The stakes were high, and every move Victor made was a calculated risk aimed at not only seizing power but also dismantling any semblance of hope that Jack might have for a peaceful future. Despite the escalating tensions and absurdities of Victor's challenges, it was clear to all that Nikki and Jack were not more than friends. Their connection was built on mutual respect and shared experiences, not on any hidden romance. In fact, their bond had become a beacon of genuine camaraderie in an otherwise stormy sea of manipulation and deceit. Nikki, ever the voice of reason, watched the unfolding chaos with worry in her eyes, knowing that the stakes for Jack were higher than anyone could imagine. Even if she could never imagine a deeper connection than the one they already shared. Meanwhile, Michael found himself in a precarious position. Once torn between loyalties, he had now decisively thrown himself into Victor's camp. Seeking favor with the man who now ruled their treacherous landscape, Michael pledged unwavering support, regardless of the moral cost. His decision to back Victor was as much about survival as it was about ambition. Michael believed that by aligning himself with Victor, he might secure a position of power, or at the very least, safeguard his own future. In his eyes, all of Victor's grand, irrational schemes were steps toward an ultimate victory that, if achieved, would leave him standing on the summit of power. But as the days wore on, it became painfully clear that things were spiraling out of control. The air crackled with tension, and the streets of Genoa City were rife with whispers of impending conflict. Everyone sensed that Victor's new maneuvers were not merely misguided attempts at domination but an outright declaration of war. The atmosphere was charged, almost electric, with the promise of an all-out showdown between two titanic forces, Jack and Victor. The two adversaries, each with his own distinct vision for the future, were poised to clash like beasts in a savage arena. Their impending battle was no longer just a personal vendetta, it was a contest of wills, where each strike, each maneuver, was a move in a deadly game with consequences that could reshape the very fabric of their world. Jack, despite having endured countless betrayals and hardships over the years, found within himself a renewed sense of resolve. He had come to accept Victor's challenge not as a mere obstacle, but as a definitive test of his determination and his ability to protect the values he held dear. In a moment that felt both inevitable and explosive, Jack stood tall in the face of the absurd onslaught that Victor had orchestrated. Every nerve in his body was taut with anticipation. The challenge was clear: Jack would not be outmaneuvered or broken by Victor's reckless tactics. The battle lines were drawn, and the promise of a brutal confrontation loomed on the horizon. It was a fight that both men had danced around for years, their rivalry a perpetual cycle of conflict, punctuated by moments of brief respite and inevitable retaliation. Jack's acceptance of the challenge was a declaration in itself, a promise that he would not back down or be intimidated by the deranged plans of his opponent. With a steely gaze and a heart filled with unyielding determination, Jack embraced the fight ahead. He knew that Victor's schemes were designed to trap him, to force him into a corner where defeat seemed inevitable. But Jack was no stranger to adversity. Every obstacle he had faced had forged him into a man who could weather any storm, no matter how violent or absurd. The tension between Jack and Victor was palpable, a tangible force that bound everyone in Genoa City to the brink of chaos. As the two prepared to meet head-on in what promised to be a no-holds-barred battle, the city braced itself for the aftermath. Their confrontation would not be a mere scuffle, it would be a collision of raw, unfiltered ambition and a struggle for supremacy that could reshape the destiny of all those entangled in their war. Even as Michael continued to cheer on Victor and the madness escalated, a quiet resolve took hold within Jack. He saw the challenge not just as an opportunity to prove himself but as a necessary crucible that would ultimately define the future of his family, his friends, and the very principles he stood for. Every punch thrown, every calculated maneuver, was a step toward reclaiming control over a destiny that had long been manipulated by the whims of a madman. And so, as the fateful day drew near, Jack accepted the gauntlet laid before him. The battle was inevitable, and no matter how irrational or ludicrous Victor's schemes became, Jack was determined to meet them head-on. In a city where loyalties were tested and sanity was in short supply, the upcoming clash between Jack and Victor was not just a fight, it was the ultimate showdown, a final reckoning where only one could emerge victorious. The stage was set, the players in position, and as the echoes of past conflicts mingled with the furious anticipation of the present, one truth remained: Jack would not yield. The challenge was accepted, and the war between reason and madness had truly begun.